Hi, I'm Jack Jost. I'm the president of the board of Ohio Students for Gun Legislation, a 501c4 political advocacy group. Welcome to our podcast where we talk with experts working to prevent gun violence. We share advice, strategies, legislative ideas, and offer steps that you can take to reduce the devastating toll that guns take in Americans' lives every day. We're speaking today with Derek Bauman, who's a retired police officer and has been really active in reducing gun violence in Cincinnati. And here to introduce our guest further is Students for Gun Legislation founder and executive director, Ethan Nichols.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in and listening along with us today. So Derek has been an advocate for change, for gun violence prevention, and on a various level of other issues for quite some time now. He's a retired Mason police officer, and he ran for city council in 2017. Derek has spoken at some of our events and rallies before, and we're very excited to speak with him today. Derek, would you take a moment, just kind of do a little review of your background and why you've gotten involved in this fight?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, thank you, Jack and Ethan, both for having me on here today. And Ethan, if I remember right, actually did a podcast when we were doing it kind of old school with just the audio, or maybe there was a video, but that was a while ago. So I'm happy to be back with you guys and join you here on this Zoom podcast. And yeah, I think you covered my background pretty well. You know, I was a police officer for 26 years. You know, I was a police firearms instructor, former competitive shooter, and was actually Top Gun, what they call Top Gun in my academy class. And they got a nice little trophy for that. So, and I'm a gun owner. But at the same time, you know, I recognize that we have really a pandemic of gun violence in our country. 35, 40,000 people, American lives lost every single year to gun violence. And it doesn't have to be that way. You know, we choose to allow this in our society and with our elected officials and even given the Second Amendment, which I support. You know, there are still common sense steps that we can take you know, to alleviate some of these things. And, you know, it's just a shame that people continue to die unnecessarily.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Derek. Yeah, so we're very excited to talk with you. So first off, if you could snap your fingers and choose one piece of legislation or policy that you could implement at a federal level that would reduce or effectively end gun violence in America, what would that one policy be if you could just choose one?
Well, you know, right off the bat, we have, and it was, you know, it was completely legal, and the case law to support it. We had for 10 years a ban on so-called assault weapons, and then when you say that, people want to get in and start, you know, splitting hairs of what exactly that means. I think we all really know what that means. High capacity magazine, shoulder-fired weapons of war, basically. And certainly when it comes to students in our schools, and we've seen just this rash of school shootings over the years. I mean, typically for the folks that do that, it's the primary weapon of choice. And when you're talking about, you know, folks that are hunters, folks that are doing various kinds of target and competitive shooting, that is a weapon that is just not necessary for that. And but what it is, you know, such and unfortunately, sadly, such a powerful weapon and tool for is killing and maiming large volumes of people in a short amount of time. And there, quite frankly, is just no reason for us to own that. If we think back, for example, to the 1930s, and when you had the kind of the Al Capone gangster era, and their weapon of choice at the time was the Tommy gun, right? A submachine gun. And you know, we said, no, this is being used as a tool for mass murder. And we don't need it as a society in the hands of folks that are outside of, you know, the military. And so it was effectively outlawed. You know, you can go through certain approvals and pay a tax and different things to get the federal firearm license to allow you to, but it's very difficult and challenging. And so what we see today is those Tommy guns are no longer used on our streets because we effectively outlawed them as it should be. And so there is no reason that same logic and that same sense can't be applied to, for example, AR-15s, AK-47s, and weapons like that.
Right, and one of the comments I see about that gun ban is, people point out that it expired, and they're like, well, that it violated the Second Amendment. Actually, it was built, and one of the pieces of it that allowed it to pass in the first place was that it was intentionally sunsetted, with the hope that at some point they could come along and make it permanent to see if it worked. The sunset was allowed to occur, so it was legal. We have the authority as a government, as a people, to say that those weapons shouldn't be in people's hands. And so I see that'd be the one thing, like right away, the easy win we could get. If we could just restore a law that was already in place, we could reduce these mass deaths.
Right, and if I could just follow up on that just very quickly, Jack, I would put that would be like 1 and then 1A. I mean, part of the problem is that at this point, there are so many in circulation that, in a certain sense, I guess you could argue that the horse is already out of the barn. But, I would follow that up with saying, the Second Amendment doesn't speak to ammunition. You have a right to, a right to bear arms, or whatever our definition of that is. But, we have the capacity also to tax certain things. And I think it would make all kinds of sense to have a tax on ammunition, whatever that ended up looking like. But where, you can have a gun, but you know what? It has a lot of societal costs attached to it. And so very logically, you could make the connection to say, you know what, we're going to tax ammunition. And to the degree that we do that, I think it tends to keep it out of people's hands that don't really, really want it or need it. And then, take those dollars and use them to offset the large magnitude of costs that this has in our society. And so to the degree that we could do that, and I can go down a list of, different licensing things, red flag laws, all of these kinds of things. But a lot of what we're talking about is really at the fringes. And we have the capability to pass laws that will pass Second Amendment muster and review, that yet would still have a lot of positive outcomes. And frankly, we don't have the political will to do it. And that's why I support, you all and the work that you're doing, and students like Ethan who are saying it doesn't have to be this way.
And I was just checking my notes. I'm trying to remember, one of our guests talked about the ammunition and laws around ammunition. Couldn't remember offhand who it was. Ethan, do you remember who that was?
I want to say that in Elena Swope.
That's what I was thinking too. I just didn't see it in my notes. But obviously these are some ideas that are out there, and they're actually on our platform for those candidates who are seeking the endorsement of Ohio Students for Gun legislation. There's a quick guide to it at our website. Like here's what's proven, what's been shown to work, what we know will work to reduce gun violence. One of the things we were really interested in talking to you about, Derek, is that another solution that's been proposed in some places is arming teachers, that it's been proposed that having teachers with weapons will reduce mass violence in schools. And you recently worked with, I believe you said it was Madison Local School District. Why don't you fill us in on what that conversation was like up there and what your role was in that?
Sure. So, it's just kind of this backward notion that we get from the right that the answer to gun violence is more guns. And I mean, look, I was a firearms instructor, range officer for years, working with trained professional police officers, right? And there were times that it happened on the range. We take all the safety precautions to make sure that if something goes wrong, it's not a worst case scenario. So we had a situation in Madison Local Schools where they sadly had a school shooting, and the school board's response to that, and this is in Butler County outside of Middletown, and the school board's response to that was, well, what we should do? We should arm the teachers so that they can counteract, anybody that comes in and tries to do this again in the future, heaven forbid. And just that notion is so backward to me. I mean, teachers have a hard enough job, so many things on their plate. Now they're going to be worried about everything that goes along with carrying a firearm, and then putting that firearm in amongst kids. Could you imagine? Little Johnny, little Derek is sitting there at his desk, and here's it. Now, where's the are they carrying it? In a holster on their side? Miss McGillicuddy is a year away from retirement, and she's got her pistol hanging off the side, is poking little Johnny when she's leaning over helping him with her homework. Maybe you can just grab it and take it. We train for that kind of stuff in police work, right? And so in my mind, there are a million outcomes rather than, there's a shooting and all of a sudden Mrs. McGillicuddy is now Rambo and she's going to go take out the shooter who has the AK-47 that we talked about that we haven't outlawed yet. But she's taking this and she's going to go out there and, like some movie action hero. It's not going to happen. What's going to happen is, no, it's going to fall out of the holster, drop onto the ground, accidental discharge, and hit little Johnny sitting there working on his math homework. There's a much greater possibility of that happening. And so you look at, their policy that they had, which was like the front and back of one page of paper. And it's just crazy to me to create this scenario of really, setting us up for disaster in these kids. So there was a lawsuit to counteract that policy that a number of the parents filed. And so I wrote what they call an amicus brief, a friend of the court brief, outlining based on my experience, 1,000 reasons why that's a bad idea. I think I had to limit it to that. And so ultimately that in appeals, that was found to be in a violation of the Ohio Revised Code, which says that if you're carrying a weapon full time and all the legal language, basically you have to meet the criteria of being a peace officer, which they weren't. It was like an 8-hour training course or something. Not all the stuff that we get with the police department. So I'm not sure what the status of that is now. If the school board is going to try to appeal that to the Ohio Supreme Court, but for now that was a win by blocking them from enacting that policy, which would put our kids there in Madison schools even more at risk.
Definitely, that's very important. We've seen so many instances of a teacher who leaves their firearm on the back of the toilet while using the restroom. 10 minutes later, the kid finds it and accidental discharge, and someone gets hurt. So that's definitely a very important policy and one that we take very seriously. So Derek, I wanted to follow up. I know that you as a retired police officer, and you're on the board of the Cincinnati NAACP. So given recent civil unrest across the nation, really across the world, and at the aftermath of the murders of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, I want to get your take on, because as an organization, we have supported the Black Lives Matter movement, the demands by those organizations and those activists. And I want to get your take as a retired police officer. How do you see racial justice, racism? How does that interconnect with gun violence?
Well, we talk about, the intersection of different societal things that are happening and how that is kind of a confluence of events and kind of bubbles to the surface. And I think we've seen that, sadly. There is a history of frankly, racism and things that have happened in terms of like people, but certainly Black folks being shot, killed, the victims of, just injustice at the hands of police officers over the years. And so, the movement is valid. It's valid. And you say, well, this is just coming to light. This is a recent, kind of a series of events that have happened. No, honestly, it's been going on for years. Like any other profession, there is some segment that are just bad, or people that have just like made terrible, terrible mistakes, no matter what their motivations are. And so from my perspective, and to my knowledge, I'm the only white police officer, recently retired now, but the only white cop or retired white cop ever to be elected to a leadership role in NAACP. It's very powerful for me in the storied history of that organization for people to have that level of trust in my heart, especially these days. But these things have been going on. We know there are systemic racism and injustices, but with the advent of the cell phone camera, and now everybody has one and ready to roll with it, that we're seeing these things come to light that frankly have occurred in the past and somehow got swept under the rug. And so my position has always been, the police perform a very vital function in our society, but that needs to be done in a way that is just and fair for all people. The bottom line is you can't kneel on somebody's neck for 9 damn minutes, or 9 seconds for that matter, but certainly not for 9 minutes. And when something like that happens, heaven forbid, we need to be honest and very forthright in calling it out as an injustice for what it is, and not either A, being silent, or B, trying to justify it in some way, shape, or form. And, I got some level of pushback on that in my, when I was still active. I actually spent our last 2 years as FOP president when I wrote an op-ed that the Inquirer ran in 2015, calling out this type of injustice. But at the end of the day, for the cops that are out there putting their lives in danger, working hard and doing the right thing for the community, that just makes their job that much harder when there is not that level of trust within the community. And so I think it's very important for us to be honest and upfront and say, you know what, damn it, if this is wrong, it's wrong. It doesn't matter who does it. And so we have, and I think when you do that, then people say, you know what, I appreciate that. As a matter of fact, these folks are like being so upfront. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt in the future, because you are involved in situations where it's life and death decisions in a moment's notice, in the heat of the moment, with your adrenaline pumping and all these kinds of things. And so you know what? If a mistake's made, or you've got something that's just bad, or heaven forbid is making any kind of racist comments on social media or wherever it may be, no, you're off the island. I don't support that. You're out. We're not going to stand for it. We're not going to put up with it. And then I think when you do that, you build that support in the community. You begin to build those bridges and connect as human beings. And I think we're on a better path to success that way. But a big part of it, especially to my fellow cops, fellow retired cops, and certainly the FOP presidents, you cannot justify every single crazy thing that happens. And so, pick one. Let's start with that. Let's pick one and say, no, this was wrong. We have to call it out for what it is, and that's how it's going to be.
Thank you, Derek. And I had one last question, and it's real timely. We're talking Monday, and we're actually going to release this video later today. Sometimes we record several days in advance. But 2 nights ago, Cincinnati was ravaged by 3 incidents. I believe 19 people were shot, 4 of them fatally. And I'll share that one of those who was killed is a former student of mine. I'd like to hear your reaction in light of we just had a round of budget cuts. Some support services around the police were cut. You have been a candidate for city council in the past. What would you like, what's your reaction to what happened Saturday night? And how can the city go forward to rebuild and protect our citizens and make the promise that this won't keep happening?
Well, I mean, first of all, clearly it's a heartbreaking situation. I'm hearing over the Rhine, and the shootings that took place here are just a couple blocks away from me. It's just heartbreaking, and I think we're seeing an uptick in violent crime across the country. I think what we have now is a confluence of events that have kind of all occurred at the same time, from obviously the George Floyd incident, just kind of brought all of those raw nerves to the surface. But meanwhile, we've got this COVID crisis going on. We've got the kids out of school. We've got people unemployed because, people that are kind of just in those challenging life circumstances. For example, maybe working service industry, and we have so many restaurants and other places closed down. So you've got this increase in unemployment. We also have, quite frankly, the bars and the nightclubs closing early. And so people are creating their own just kind of space to gather. And then we have the criminal element that's out there that will, is kind of take advantage of these situations, and also then just all of these things kind of coming together. So we have a scenario where we have a problem in this particular area. For example, one property where there's just outright, like duffel bag levels of drug trade going on. And we could have a whole other show about how our drug policy plays into this, but I would digress on that for the moment. And then, illegal dice games going on out on the streets, prostitution happening over here, and all of these forces just kind of have created a perfect storm, sadly, this summer. And just this general angst that I think is out there with everything that's happening. And so it's created a condition that's right for that. And then you add into that how we are here in the U.S. with our, just plethora of guns. There are more guns in the U.S. than there are people, by a factor of 2 or 3, that this is the result. And so it's a great challenge. And I think one of the things that I personally want to stay away from is either A, just offering empty thoughts and prayers, condolences, or B, having a knee-jerk reaction that's extreme one way or the other. It's a very complex problem. Anybody that's just offering simple solutions, I would say it might, feel good, but it's just not going to be the case. But part of our challenge is, quite frankly, we've got to weather this COVID storm, which I think is really playing a big role in all of this. But there are just all of these factors, and it's a challenging problem. So, at this point, I don't know that there's any easy or simple answers. But I don't think that either A, just saying, okay, we're doing away with the police, and just everybody fend for themselves, or now we're going to send in, the police as an occupying force to just go, move in there. At those extremes, I don't think either one is right. It's just going to take a lot of work and a whole set of solutions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Derek. Looks like this is a wrap for us today. I think we're out of time for now, but I want to thank you so much for coming on and joining us today. For all of those who are listening along, I want to encourage you to go to our website, studentsforgunlegislation.org, where you can donate, learn more about us, get involved, or contact your elected officials. If you want to go follow Derek Bauman on Twitter, it's just at Derek Bauman, and you can learn more about him and the amazing work that he's doing.
Thank you, everybody. And thanks, Derek. Appreciate learning from you every time.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate the opportunity to be here, and look forward to working with you in the future to tackle these tough problems.